pleasure to have our distinguished guests today here with us, who will be introduced to you in a few. Before I hand the floor to our moderator of today's webinar, let me say something on the rules of engagement. As this is a very high-level dialogue, only the moderator and the panelists have been given the privilege to unmute their mics and speak. All the rest of the participants will be on mute for the entire period of the discussion. But we will be opening the chat box for any participants joining us this evening to write their feedbacks and also their comments, which will be getting later on as a feedback in this webinar discussion. I would like to also say that this webinar is being live casted on our YouTube channel as well. So those that cannot be able to join the Zoom meeting, they can directly view our YouTube channel for the live cast of the discussion. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor to our moderator for this webinar this evening, our Executive Director of the National ID Program, Yodahe Zamikael. So Mr. Yodahe, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ebenezer, and my very distinguished guests today. Very happy to have you all here, and thank you so much for joining us. This webinar, we're number one, we're celebrating it, as Ebenezer mentioned, because of the SDG 16.9 ID Day movement, and it's in recognition of that movement that we're gathered here today to discuss about ID and digital public infrastructure and transforming governance through digitization and all of these topics. Very happy to have distinguished guests here today, friends of the Digital ID program, policymakers, highly esteemed guests, some of which are from Ethiopia. By the way, we're just celebrating our new year here. So we're in the middle of the holiday season, so very, very happy to have all of you here. So let me start with Dr. Joseph. He is one of the foremost authorities in biometrics. He's the founder of the ID for Africa movement, and he's its executive chairman. We have also Julia Clark with us, senior economist at ID4D, ID for Development, and she's a global lead for DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure, at the World Bank. We also have Dr. Abiot with us on behalf of Ministry of Innovation, His Excellency Dr. Beleta. He is a senior advisor for data and governance systems. We also have Mr. Joseph, Dr. Joseph Pirbonwa. He's a chairperson of the board of directors of NIRA. He's joining us from Uganda. And then we have Jote Work with us. She is a senior advisor at the National Bank of Ethiopia, and she is also the board of director, one of the founders of NewFin, Ethiopian Women in Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'll just ask each of you just one round of questions so we can start the conversation going, and then I'll come back to each of you at a second round. So let me start with Dr. Abiot. Dr. Abiot, the Ethiopian digital government strategy, what we call the EGOV strategy, positions a digital ID system as a crucial element. Perhaps if you could elaborate on the government's overall plan and policy to leverage ID as one of the foundational layers of DPI, digital public infrastructure, in areas such as streamlined service delivery, increased transparency, improved citizen participation. Also, if you can elaborate a little bit on how FIDA, in our case, we call our ID system FIDA, how FIDA can help integrate seamlessly with other foundational systems, such as we have the addressing system, we have the payment gateway, national payment gateway integration, and other layers of DPI, important layers. So how can we leverage and make sure that all of these DPI platforms can talk to each other, create seamless and citizen-friendly, user-friendly environment? So perhaps let me open the floor to you, Dr. Abiot.
Okay, thank you very much, Yodahe. Thank you for inviting the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. I'm here on behalf of Ministry of Innovation and Technology, representing the Minister. Happy New Year, happy Ethiopian New Year, and also happy the ID Day celebration. I will try to answer the questions in the framework of the new Ethiopian digital government strategy. Maybe let me give you a small background. Previously, in 2011, 2015, we have the first e-government strategy for Ethiopia. And the second e-government strategy was like 2016 to 2020. Now we have a new strategy which will cover from 2025 to 2030, which we call it Ethiopian Digital Government Strategy. This new strategy has incorporated various new concepts like the whole of government approach, implementing the national enterprise architecture, developing the ETO Connect as a data platform, having digital public infrastructure concepts, as well as to develop the GovStack. The envisioned government stack of Ethiopia is expected to facilitate interaction among various applications, especially we expect that when the GovStack is in place, it will have the payment system, the ID, the registration, and other data exchange system at the center. So previously, our approach to e-government was every organization is developing its own suite of application, but in the new approach, we will have this GovStack. So we expect this will facilitate interoperability and scalability of application, and also will help us to create user-centric design. So in the government stack, ID is the central tool because ID will facilitate interaction among citizens and e-government services. It doesn't mean that without ID there is no interaction, but the presence of the digital ID will help a smooth interaction between the government and the citizens, and also having the ID in place and as a government stack, it will also help to streamline data exchanges as well as protecting the individuals' data during e-government development. The FIDA, the presence of FIDA in Ethiopia, we expect it will solve a lot of problems. So we can easily reach citizens. So far, for instance, we have e-services that are provided online to the citizens, but since we don't have the digital ID in place, we usually use the mobile numbers of citizens as a mechanism to identify users. So using such type of identification system or using the mobile number as identification system has its own a lot of problems, and also it's not scalable. For instance, if people are using their ID, their mobile number for one application, another mobile for another application. So it's difficult to aggregate data to use in further policy application. So the presence of FIDA we expect it will help us to have seamless integration among e-government services. The other expectation from the government side is the presence of FIDA will facilitate innovation because since the presence of a unique digital ID will help us to try various types of business models. And also it's easy to deploy others to work with government data and also to utilize government data for developing further applications. So the new strategy it's already as a final stage. The drafting process is finalized. Now it's waiting for approval. When it is work on developing the Ethiopian GovStack, hopefully at that time the FIDA will have a critical number of users. So integrating the FIDA application to the e-government will be hopefully easy and will result in an efficient e-government service in Ethiopia. Thank you. Back to you, Yoday.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abiot. As you rightfully said, digital cannot be siloed, and the new eGov strategy is going in the right direction, building the Ethiopia stack, Gov stack, no longer siloed philosophies. Very happy to hear about this progress. One question for you, Dr. Joseph. How can effective governance and robust policy frameworks enhance the implementation of inclusive digital ID systems across Africa? As you know, ID is no longer limited to a village or a region or a sub-national, not even limited at the nation. People are already talking about continental and global identification. So in light of all of this, what role does ID for Africa play, specifically in Africa, in guiding these efforts, and also with regards to Identity Day? You're on mute, Dr. Joseph.
First of all, I'll iterate what the doctor has just said. Happy Ethiopian New Year's Day. And also, I wish you all the best for Identity Day coming up on Monday, 16 September. You asked a very, very interesting question, and I want to unpack it by breaking it into two parts. And the first part is we should ask, what is the principal impact of governance and policy frameworks on ID systems? Why are they important? Before we understand, I would argue that they impact more the long-term success and sustainability of identity systems. In fact, I would go one step further by saying, without the right governance and policy in place, these systems are bound to fail. So this leads me to the next question. Why do I think that without governance, you're going to fail? Why do I think governance and policy frameworks hold the key to success of identity systems? There are actually numerous reasons for that, but in the interest of time, I'll just focus on three things to remind us of their importance. I think first, governance builds trust among relying parties and partners. Governance frameworks are essential because they institutionalize a balance of power that ensures that stakeholders have a say in the management and oversight of identity systems. This creates an ecosystem of trusted partners with guaranteed rights and clear responsibilities. So without shared governance, I think an identity authority acting alone is likely to fail. So that's one element. The second element, governance builds trust with the people who are the system's ultimate beneficiaries. If you have transparent and straightforward governance understood by the public, that provides individuals with the assurances they need to confidently engage with the system. In other words, they are essential for securing the buy-in of the population. Without governance, there will not be a strong buy-in. Third, governance ensures digital identity systems cause no harm, of course, if they have the right governance. By implementing the correct guardrails through the proper legal and governance framework, you alleviate concerns and assure everyone that the system is legal, secure, inclusive, and responsible. And so all these positive outcomes of governance, trust from the partners, trust from the people, and confidence that the system will do no harm, ensure, in our opinion, widespread adoption and consistent use of the ID system, and therefore sustainability and success. You asked in the second part of the question about sort of how does ID for Africa play a role in this? As many of you know, and many of you members of this movement, and Yoday is the ambassador for ID for Africa in Ethiopia. As many of the people following this know, that ID for Africa actually serves as the curator of best practices and trusted knowledge. We facilitate knowledge exchange among countries, and we foster essential dialogue without dictating outcomes or prescribing outcomes, because we believe the continent needs to make choices for itself, but needs to make informed choices. So we bring that knowledge to the continent. Now, governance and legal frameworks have been a part of and parcel of our focus areas, especially in recent years. Today, the growing body of knowledge about all aspects of identity management, including governance, forms a playbook of best practices to our community. So if you like, you could say ID for Africa is the trusted custodian of the playbook on identity-related good practices. Now, one of the initiatives that we have launched, as you know, in 2018, and we continue to see it flourish and grow, has been, with our community, has been Identity Day. We believe building awareness about good practices in identity, including governance and legal frameworks, and sensitizing the population and building appreciation for the importance of identity, contributes to the overall success of an identity program. This is why we pushed for ID Day. We continue to lobby for it everywhere. I actually commend Ethiopia for its consistent efforts to use ID Day to build awareness and exchange knowledge and best practices. We really salute your efforts, and we thank you for giving us this opportunity to appear on this prestigious webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Joseph, and we appreciate your inputs. And as you said, technology is not the biggest piece of the digital, it's governance and policy and the frameworks thereof. So now I come to you, Julia. How do we prioritize integration of digital identity systems within broader governance frameworks? And what specific outcomes have been achieved in enhancing service delivery and accountability in the different countries that you work with? Can you mention perhaps some examples?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Happy New Year, happy ID Day to everyone. So I think, Joseph gave quite a comprehensive answer already on governance. So just, to reiterate again, legal and governance frameworks are essential for ID, for digital ID, and for DPI. And this includes both, enabling laws, so a national ID or a civil registration related laws and their institutions. And again, importantly, safeguards, particularly around non-discrimination, data protection and privacy, and cybersecurity. And I think, as Joseph was also saying, this is particularly important when we talk about DPI, because not every ID system constitutes DPI, right? To be DPI, you have to be foundational, you have to be interoperable, providing these digital building blocks, and it has to be built for the public good, which is essentially building in norms around inclusion, around data protection, around user centricity. So these are essential elements. We support all of this work in the World Bank. So for example, here in Ethiopia, FIDA system is underpinned by an ID proclamation, as well as a data protection law that was just passed this year, which the World Bank has helped to support through technical assistance and financing. It's also important, particularly again, when thinking about DPI and how ID will be used, that it's supported and regulated within and essentially integrated into this broader legal and regulatory frameworks. So if you don't have, for example, an e-transaction law or digital signature laws that sort of make it equivalent to conduct a transaction end-to-end online versus a paper-based transaction, then you have limitations in how the ID system and the DPI use systems can actually be integrated for real service delivery. Broader data governance frameworks are also super important for digital ID, as well as data sharing and other elements of DPI. In terms of sequencing, which is always tricky, of course, ideally, many of these, data protection laws, cybersecurity measures, e-transaction laws would already be in place when we're designing a new or improved ID system, but we know that this isn't always the case. And particularly as norms are evolving, there's almost always room for improvement in existing legislation. And I think one of the really important things about digital ID and about the DPI agenda that we've seen as in Ethiopia is that these projects can actually be catalysts for broader data protection and broader data governance within the economy. So we see that a lot of countries through their digital ID and DPI programs are actually able to advance on this type of safeguard that has broad ramifications, for the economy beyond just those systems. So it can actually be sort of a central point there. So on the second part of your question on enhancing service delivery and accountability, we know that digital identity verification and authentication are sort of crucial functions for both the public and private sector. And so building these systems as the DPI that can be reusable and integrated across sectors is really important. And we know that it's important to put these systems in place as quickly as possible, but as well as possible. So we know, for example, from World Bank research across 85 countries, we know that countries that had elements of DPI in place, including digitalized ID systems and elements of data sharing, were able to reach 3 times as many beneficiaries during COVID than countries that had to start from scratch, for example, compiling lists of beneficiaries. And so having these systems in place can make it much easier to respond rapidly, whether it's a climate crisis, whether it's a natural disaster, to make sure that we can roll out new digital services much faster. And we know we've seen broad, again, benefits across economies. So in Singapore, for example, they had an eKYC service that was facilitated by the SingPass digital ID. And we have a paper online mentioning how this reduced the time to complete a digital transaction by about 80%. And we've seen similar types of, potential improvements across countries. So in the Philippines, we recently partnered with the government to conduct a study that would estimate the potential cost and time savings of adopting a new digital national ID by essentially looking at things like opening a bank account, applying for a business permit, applying for a social program, and measuring the current time that it takes to do these transactions, and then modeling, if you substituted in the digital ID, how much time and money would that save? So in one bank, for example, we found that using the digital ID for account opening has the potential to reduce the time that customers have to wait from 29 minutes to 11 minutes, so a 62% improvement, to reduce the time, to reduce the costs for the bank itself per transaction by about 87%. So talking about, accountability and governance, for municipalities, the business permit process. We saw in one municipality, people walk into the building and they have to visit 8 different desks or windows to get a business permit. And at each station, they're requesting almost the same data, and people have to photocopy the same documents many times. And we know this isn't unique to the Philippines, it's common all over the world. So the process were remodeled. If instead of that process, they used the national ID and some improvements in data sharing as part of a broader DPI, they would improve customer experience and transparency, reducing time that people spend waiting by about 80%, and reducing the costs of the municipality for a business permit transaction by up to 57%. And so this is the type of work we're supporting across a number of countries. In Ethiopia, we're actually planning a similar study that will look at the benefits of FIDA for bank account opening, registering a power of attorney, and SIM card issuance. Hopefully that's some good and interesting examples.
Yeah, no, those are awesome examples. Thank you, Julia, especially PKI, data exchange, all of these layers, they are enablers, but at the end of the day, their impact is felt when they're actually integrated with services, PKI, data exchange ID. So it's what you are measuring right now in the Philippines and Singapore. You've mentioned good examples. Now I come to Mr. Joseph. NIRA, it's NIRA from Uganda. It's leveraging technology to improve the efficiency and transparency of identity registration processes. And you've been at it for a lot of many years now. What impact had this had on enhancing public trust in government services in Uganda? So the average Ugandan citizen, thanks to the efficiency and transparency brought about by this by the national ID in Uganda, how has it impacted the citizen on the ground?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and greetings to all members of the panel here. I want to thank you for the kind invitation to be part of this panel, and I wish you a happy new year. NIRA stands for National Identification and Registration Authority. It is responsible for creating, managing, maintaining, operationalizing the National Identification Register by registering citizens for national identification and then issuing them with a national ID for their use and a special number for each person registered. The authority started in 2015 by government and is set up by a government act. Specifically to answer your question, we know that identification of person or identity management is largely a technology-driven function. NIRA too is a technology-driven institution by virtue of this mandate. Processes of registration, identification, assignment of a special number, data processing, personalization are all technology-driven for effective and efficiency. This technology has ensured efficiency and transparency in that NIRA, the system, is able to identify an individual and assign him a special number and unique number. NIRA operates a TPI, that is a third-party interface, where all government ministries, departments, and agencies and the private sector are allowed to access particular data or information on our system about persons for purposes of service delivery for the institutions by enabling the institution to access the register. We have many government institutions which access the register for this purpose in order to improve their efficiency. We have the Social Security Fund, we have the Revenue Authority, we have the Petroleum Authority, we have the Immigration Department, the Electoral Commission, the Investments Authority, and various government ministries. Then we have telecom companies, which also use our data to allocate SIM cards to individuals. The World Bank Identity for Development findings for 2017 indicate that when Uganda Electoral Commission started using data from our register to build the voters register, the cost of the voters, the cost per voter reduced from $11.4 to $8.6. That is almost by about 30%. The government of Uganda also conducted a civil service payroll audit, and by using our national register, they were able to save about 6 million shillings, $6 million, which had been spent on ghosts or non-existent workers. All the above underscores the role of NIRA in facilitating government in the service delivery. For instance, at an individual level, one to open an account in the bank needs a national register, or to purchase SIM cards, as I've said, for telephones, they need a national register. To get a passport, they need a national identity card. To acquire a driving permit, you need a national identity card. To get a tax identification number to pay taxes, you need a national identity card. To vote, you need a national identity card. Recruitments by government to identify people who are applying for jobs, they need a national identity card. And other transactions like health services, purchase of land. So this is to prove that, to highlight that Ugandans are truly committed and they appreciate the credibility of the national ID. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for sharing NIRA's journey. You brought about a lot of agencies a lot of initiatives, a lot of such as elections. You mentioned civil service, telcos, revenues. All of this have now a foundational or a trust framework that they can rely on to offer better services for the citizens. So thank you for sharing this. Jyote, I come to you now as of course, a person from the finance sector and an economist. I'll ask you about financial inclusion. So in Ethiopia, financial inclusion and digital ID, of course, National Bank also recognizes that they come hand in hand. What specific strategies as NBE, as the National Bank of Ethiopia, are you implementing and to leverage these systems for expanding access to financial services, especially for the underserved or marginalized communities?
Thank you very much, Dahi, for having me, and Happy New Year to everyone. Indeed, coming to financial inclusion, which basically is having access to useful and affordable financial services, which starts from opening accounts at formal financial institutions and all the way to accounts being used for payments, savings, credit, and insurance, of course, delivered in a responsible and sustainable way, as a key priority for Ethiopia. And the National Bank of Ethiopia, along with several key stakeholders, has been leading this effort in terms of expanding access. And as we all know, there has been significant progress as a result in terms of especially expanding digital payments in the last two to three years. And right now, in fact, in 2024, we're very happy to see digital transactions surpassing 2.4 billion transactions, really thanks to a robust enabling environment, interoperable payment infrastructure, and as well as successes related with services being provided by mobile network operators and as well as financial institutions. But Yodahi, as you noted earlier, many still lack access to formal financial services, and many others, even if they have transactional accounts with financial institutions, they're not able to benefit from productive financial services, be it payments, credit, insurance, or other forms of services. And this is much more pronounced in sectors such as agriculture, in rural areas, for women, for SMEs that are the productive segments of the economy. But due to several reasons, including lack of identification, most of these segments have been either completely excluded or haven't been able to productively get services. So in recognition of that, we've been partnering with the National ID really from day one, recognizing that the unique identification of borrowers or clients of financial institutions and the population at large is really the basis for expanding financial services at scale, as Julia was also mentioning earlier, as it provides for a basis for knowing the clients of financial institutions and eKYC. And once they have transactional accounts, it is also very important and critical foundation for expanding payments and beyond payments, really, as we're focusing right now at the National Bank to expand access to credit and other forms of productive financial services. And through that, so the National ID has been recognized as the primary financial services ID of choice for financial institutions. And we've also been working actively to support the rolling out of the ID to at least existing customers of banks and microfinance institutions to really enable especially those that are underserved, that actually lack traditional financial services and relationships with formal financial institutions, to actually have the opportunities to get included, but more importantly, to also benefit from the inclusion really beyond the transactional accounts. Thank you. Back to you, Dahi.
Thank you so much, Jyote. As you said, deepening this financial inclusion requires DPI platforms such as identification and good KYC to build this credit history. So now we have a few minutes left, so I'll quickly go through a second round of questions to each of our esteemed panelists. So I come back to you, Dr. Abiot. Earlier I asked about e-government. Now I wanted to ask about e-commerce and what exactly is the Ministry of Innovation doing in terms of, because e-commerce is the actual citizen touch point. That's where we see convenience, that's where we see ease of doing business, etc. So what's happening there in that space?
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to start by recognizing what Julia said on how to use the ID as a DPI. Yes, it's true to use the ID as a digital public infrastructure, including as part of government stock. We need to have the legal and the regulatory in places. So at the beginning of the Digital Ethiopia 2025, the first thing that we did was to enact the e-transaction proclamation for Ethiopia. It's approved by the parliament. And the second activity was working on the personal data protection, which is approved this year. We have also now have a draft for national data governance framework, as well as the data sharing directive. Is at the draft stage. We are hoping that before 2025, we will have these two important documents endorsed by the government. So that means we are doing the pre-preparation for using the digital ID as a DPI, and as well as to be included in the government stack, Ethiopian government stack. So in terms of e-commerce, as you said, Yodahe, is very important and one of the most important platform for the citizens in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a very rich country with a population of more than 120 million, and the population is dispersed all across the country. So creating market is very difficult. So e-commerce is one of the big solutions to solve the existing challenges, as well as to bring new opportunities. This is why the Digital Ethiopia 2025 recognizes promoting e-commerce as one of the major initiative to be implemented. The e-commerce development in Ethiopia is at an nascent stage, and most of the e-commerce activities currently is conducted using social media. And one of the challenges with having social media-based e-commerce is that it's not scalable, and also it's difficult to protect customers' interest. Recently, the government has drafted the Ethiopian e-commerce strategy. It's the drafting process is already completed. Now the approval process is started. So this e-commerce strategy is focusing on strengthening the local market and also promoting the export markets in Ethiopia. So here also the digital ID has special significance because, as you know, e-commerce is about trust, and the trust is coming from identity. Even if you have the legal and other things, unless you have a robust ID, it's difficult to build trust and security in e-commerce. So our expectation from FIDA is very high in this area. The other one is in simplifying user experience. Unless you have a clear identity system, it's difficult to have user experiences because it's not easy for deploying new customers. It's not easy to have new merchants online unless you have a clear identity system. The other thing is on expanding inclusion. E-commerce has big potential for economic inclusion of the citizens. So especially in border trade as well as trade in local communities. So having the digital ID in place will be a great advantage. The other thing that we are working currently is that, as you know, Ethiopia is one of the signatory of the African Free Continental Trade Agreement. And also, as part of this continental market, we have also endorsed the digital trade protocol. And now we are working on the annexes like interoperability of ID, interoperability of payment, and interoperability of technologies throughout Africa. So one of our major expectations from FIDA is that, especially in the coming year, that means in 2025 or in the new Ethiopian year, we will have some use cases to be implemented to showcase the potential of the digital ID in implementing these various agreements and strategies. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abiat, for sharing updates on e-commerce, data governance, and also FCFTA and what Ethiopia envisions to do in these areas. Dr. Joseph, quickly, I come to you now. Earlier, I asked about ID for Africa's role in guiding different various efforts in inclusive ID in Africa. Given its 10-year anniversary, which was recently celebrated, and given 2025 is a big year, not only because ID for Africa is coming to Addis, but because a lot of governments have committed to increasing inclusion. There is Africa-wide commitments made at the African Union level, different commitments towards ID for everyone, identity as a human right. So what do you propose for governments to address these gaps? How are they best addressed, especially for those who are not yet included?
Actually, you're absolutely right. First of all, that there has been a major shift over the last 10 years in what's talked about and what's addressed. You're absolutely right in saying that it is no longer about systems or technology choices and developments. It is about creating this universal coverage. What are the pathways for getting there? And I think this is all about creating a different kind of culture within the government, to understanding that you have to gain the users' trusts and offer them a compelling value proposition. So it's an exciting time, but I think there is no single strategy to close the gaps of identity systems. There are good behaviors that we can do. I think it's essential to address, of course, your basic supply and demand dynamics related to identity, but it has to be done with a completely different attitude. We gotta move away from the old ways of doing identity. You have to treat people as customers. You have to shift the narrative and start building people-centric programs that prioritize use, convenience, accessibility, and also, very important, satisfaction. And so it's not magic. In fact, it's the law of market, and product and service companies live and die by it. I mean, you go to the mall and you see this is exactly what they do. To succeed in a consumer business, you must offer what people want. This means employing marketing tools like Identity Day. That's a marketing tool. Establish dense points of contact with the population, such as enough enrollment centers, either direct or through the partner network. Ensure a satisfactory value proposition through empowering use without friction. So that's the essential idea. Empower use without friction. Positive word of mouth basically follows, because the value proposition excites people and makes them live that experience of utilizing their identity. So I'm only half joking when I say that to run the identity authority or run the identity project like you would run a company selling a consumer product, and you will succeed.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Joseph. I was just writing this down. Treat the citizen as a customer. That's a very good input. Now coming to you, Julia, given ID for this broader implementation in multiple countries around the globe, I'm not sure the exact number, but I'm sure it's at least more than a dozen. So across the globe, you have this presence and you're working with different countries. What's your observation and insight on key challenges faced in ensuring inclusivity, accessibility in digital ID systems and other DPIs exchange, etc., particularly in marginalized communities.
Thank you so much. And as others have said before, I mean, I think inclusion is a central requirement for DPI, and has always been at the heart of the World Bank's work on IDPI and now digital more broadly. I think the first step one, is to understand what are the existing pain points and barriers that people face. These can be economic barriers, social barriers, technological barriers, procedural, legal, that disproportionately affect marginalized and vulnerable groups such as women, persons with disabilities, the elderly, people without prior documentation, etc. And to really, again, in this first step, begin with the question, and as you were just echoing and Joseph said, is how can we make getting and using the ID easier for everyone? And that this should really be the starting point. And so, for example, at the bank, we work with countries to do what we call inclusion studies or end user studies to try to understand what are people's actual experiences under the current status quo and how can these be improved. So, for example, in Ethiopia, we've partnered, of course, with NIDP to do an end user study and specifically a gender gap study. Because we know that, currently in the pre-FIDA Kebele ID cards, there's a big gap in ownership between men and women. And so we wanted to figure out, well, why is that? And then to identify what are the concrete steps that FIDA can take to solve this problem as it rolls out its new system and ensures equal access for women. So once you have a picture of these exact barriers, the next step is then addressing those barriers, whether it's through legal reforms or policy or procedures. And a key element here, again, is not just a top-down approach, but involving civil society organizations, CSOs, NGOs, and communities directly. First, again, to hear from them about real concerns and issues that people are facing, and then to work with them to address that problem. So this may be legal reforms, thinking about who is eligible for the ID system and how they can be registered. So again, in Ethiopia, I know that UNHCR is partnering with NIDP to prioritize access to ID for refugees, who are a group that's often left behind by ID systems. Eliminating or subsidizing fees so the ID is free or close to free, reducing the amount of documentation required and making sure that everyone can register even if they don't have prior documentation. Interestingly, minimizing data collection is a really important step for inclusion in addition to data and privacy protection. The more data the more data you collect, the more documents require, the harder it will be for people to provide that information, the more inaccuracies and errors you might have. And so reducing data can also really help with inclusion. Bringing registration closer to the people. So in Philippines during COVID, they actually went door to door with tablets, registering people's demographic information and focusing on low-income groups, elderly people, people with disabilities, and then giving them dedicated appointment times to come to the office for biometric data collection. So simplifying and bringing, closer to the people. And user testing is really important. So again, not just designing ID applications or other DPI in a lab in the capital city, but actually getting out into the field and seeing if those solutions really work for people. So in Indonesia, we worked with the government to do a mock-up of the digital ID application and then test it in focus groups with women and low literacy users and persons with disabilities, et cetera. And I'll end there just saying that I think beyond, getting to the earlier points as well, beyond just ensuring inclusivity in the ID system itself, it's inclusivity, around how it's used and making sure that the use of the ID doesn't then become a barrier to people to access services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia, on all of these best practices on how to best ensure that communities are included. Marginalized communities are also at the center of the design of these programs. Coming on the same topic to you, Mr. Joseph, on marginalized communities, what's the best practice in Uganda's case? What has NIRA done to make sure that all of these essential services particularly in rural and marginalized communities, where typically you may find people without any form of prior documentation. So how did you make sure that use cases for these communities really work well?
Thank you very much. And the previous speaker, I think, has helped me to answer this question. But I will add on the Uganda's version in particular. Our mission is to be a center of excellence in providing identification and registration services to people. And to be a center of excellence, you have to have best practices, including best practices for affirmative action for some minority groups. The way we have planned our rollouts is to make sure we are in the remotest areas, what we call districts here. Right now, we are in 157 districts where we do the registration. We are in 117 districts, and soon we shall roll out a program to reach all the 146 districts. Secondly, we have trained our people, the ICT experts, and posted them in these rural areas so that they are able to resolve registration issues right on the ground without referring them to the headquarters. We have a call center where people can call in and get some basic information without waiting for the day to open or without moving to our offices. We have introduced services online. You can go to our website and get the services we have online, to the extent even of generating confirmation letters online, and which are electronically signed for our people. We have put some affirmative action in schools. We register people in schools as a special program, anybody above 16 years. We have also started registering. We are also registering, allocating now national identification registration number in hospitals once somebody is born in a hospital. We are working with the Ministry of Health, and we have already rolled out this program. In the same spirit, if death is reported, we are able now to capture the death and mark out that person who is on the register as dead. Very soon, later this year, we are going to roll out a very big program of registration and issuing new cards to people. We have a fresh registration and registering even giving new cards to the people who already registered, about 15 million people, and we are going to register another 17 million people, so that they get cards with the latest technology, the latest safety measures in these cards. We have arrangements for the people in the diaspora. We through our missions, those who are living abroad but want still to identify with our countries because they want to do business, they want to buy land, they want to open accounts, they want to pay taxes for the business they are doing at home. They can go straight to and get a national ID. They register at our missions, and in collaboration with the headquarters, we generate a card and send it to them so that when they come back to Uganda, they are able to transact. There are some areas really which are geographically hard to reach, where people cannot come to our places, our 146 or 117 centers, which I've told you. We have made arrangements in this mass renewal and mass registration exercise, which is coming on, to reach them. We shall have special programs. We have many radio stations, over 150 radio stations in the country, which are locally based, and we shall put up programs. We shall to try to use the prudent method to reach them. We shall issue a program when we shall be in their respective hard-to-reach areas, so that they are not left out in the exercise of mass renewal and mass registration of the new cards we are hoping to issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for sharing NIRA's Uganda's journey on making sure that both on the physical space, on the digital space, you're available to the citizens, to you're convenient, you're present for all sections of the society. Now, coming back to you, Jote, last but not least, of course, given the recent transformation, macroeconomic reforms that we're doing here in Ethiopia, what does the National Bank plan to do in terms of collaborating with different partners and stakeholders in the space, in the digital space, be it the private sector, civil society, and making sure that there's a robust digital ecosystem that ensures, coming back to inclusion again, that ensures secure and inclusive financial transactions for everyone?
Yes, thank you so much, Yodahe. Indeed, expanding secure and inclusive financial services is at the heart of what we're doing right now at the National Bank. In fact, right now, we're implementing a national financial inclusion strategy that aims to include at least 70% of our population in formal financial services. And as noted earlier, not only including, but ensuring that they actually utilize the transactional accounts for actual access to credit, payments, and other productive uses that could actually change the lives of the individuals and collectively as a country as well. In this regard, the effort so far and as well as in the future has been a collaborative one, including, for example, the investment in the payment infrastructure, such as the instant payment system, that is being laid by the national switch, and as well as digitization of merchant payments through standard QR codes. And as noted earlier, of course, we've also been working very closely with the National ID program that you lead, Yodahe, to facilitate eKYC, and hopefully going forward as a basis for creditworthiness analysis to further expand access to credit. And in this, of course, financial institutions and mobile network operators have been playing a tremendous role in terms of actually expanding services on the ground. And related with this, of course, as you also noted in your question, it's also very important to ensure the services are also secure and responsible. And to ensure that, the National Bank recently established a dedicated unit looking after consumer protection and education issues. And in this regard, of course, we very much welcome and see a lot of contribution from all stakeholders, including civil society, financial institutions themselves, but as well as all other stakeholders to ensure consumers are well protected, services are secure, and of course, as noted earlier, as inclusive as possible as well. Back to you, Yodahe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jote. And I really would like to thank all of my esteemed guests today for not only sharing their time, but most importantly, contributing to a body of knowledge. We have about 200 registered audience today here, but we're also live casting. So a lot of people from civil societies, government, we have a different variety of audience who would benefit from all of this shared knowledge and insights given. So I thank you all, and I again say happy ID 2024, ID Day 2024. So back to you, Abenzer.
Thank you so much, Yodahe, for that excellent moderation. And thank you so much to all our distinguished guests for joining us this evening, and to all of you joining from around the world, as well as those watching us now on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. The International Identity Day is going to continue. The day is actually being celebrated on the 16th of September. And then Ethiopia will be having a week-long activities promoting digital identity, digital governance, and sensitizing citizens on the importance of inclusion using digital identification, pushing the registration of the flagship project of the country, which is the FIDA Digital ID. So please follow us on our social media channels as we continue to promote this important global event. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. We have received some feedback on the chat box, which we will be providing feedback after this webinar. We will also be sharing a live recording of today's webinar for those who were not able to join us on Monday on our YouTube channel, and then we can also participate and share to your networks. Again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So much.